The oncologist at Uravinsky Cancer Center told me on a Tuesday afternoon in October. Not about the cancer itself, I already knew about that. She told me about the drug. A targeted oral medication, 1 tablet a day, that could stop the disease from progressing without destroying what was left of my immune system. The catch was that it wasn't yet approved under Ontario's drug benefit program. The review was expected to take another 4 to 6 months. If I wanted to start now, and she said I should start now, the first month's supply would cost $3,200 out of pocket. I asked her to say that number again. She did. I walked out of the clinic into the gray of a Hamilton October afternoon and sat in my truck in the parking lot without moving for a long time. Then I called my son. He said he'd just closed a $7.8 million development deal in Oakville. I could hear glasses clinking somewhere behind his voice. He said everything was tied up. His wife said the same thing. The line went quiet. Less than an hour later, my daughter called. She said, "Dad, I've been putting a little aside every month. It's not much, but take it." She had no idea what that choice was about to change. Hello, and welcome. Before we go further, I'd appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe. It means more of these stories can reach people who need to hear them. Leave a comment and let me know where you're listening from. I love hearing from you. And a quick note, this story blends real experience with fictionalized elements, created to illustrate truths worth hearing. Any resemblance to specific individuals or places is coincidental, but the lesson is real. My name is Eugene Callister. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years as an ironworker with a union local out of Hamilton. Structural steel, bridges, high-rises, the bones of buildings that are still standing. I walked beams 40 stories up when my knees still let me. I retired at 58 after a back injury that the Workplace Safety and Insurance Board originally said didn't qualify for long-term compensation. My wife Joyce passed 4 years ago. Breast cancer. 11 months from diagnosis to the end. I held her hand in the palliative ward at St. Joseph's and told her I would be all right. I have been trying to keep that promise ever since. My son Griffin is from my first marriage. 44 years old now, commercial real estate developer with an office in Mississauga. He grew up mostly with his mother in Oakville after we divorced when he was 9. He came to me every other weekend until he was 15, and then the weekends stopped. I told myself it was normal, boys get busy, they pull away. I told myself that for 20 years. My daughter Willa is from my marriage to Joyce, 34 years old. She's a registered practical nurse at a long-term care home in the East End of Hamilton. Single mother. She drives a 2016 Civic with 160,000 kilometers on it, and she works double shifts when she can get them. I'd seen Griffin on the local news 3 days before my appointment at Uravinsky. He was standing in front of a new building in Oakville, shaking hands with the ward counselor, smiling into cameras, like a man who had never once worried about a bill in his life. His photo ran in the Hamilton Spectator under the headline, "Local developer makes his mark on the lakeshore. $7.8 million. Mixed-use development." His wife Rochelle stood beside him in the photograph, one hand on his arm, smiling the way people smile when they know a camera is pointed at them. I looked at that photo for a long time before I set the paper down. Now, sitting in my truck outside Uravinsky, I picked up my phone and called him. He answered on the 4th ring. Behind his voice I could hear the sounds of celebration, laughter, the clink of glasses, someone calling his name. He sounded warm and distracted, the way he always sounds when he is performing for an audience. "Hey Dad, what's going on?" I told him about the diagnosis. I'd known for 2 months, but I'd been managing it quietly, not wanting to alarm anyone before I understood what we were dealing with. I told him about the drug and the cost. $3,200. I said the number clearly. There was a pause long enough that I could hear the background noise shift. "Dad, that's a lot to take in. I didn't know things had gotten that serious." "I'm telling you now." "Listen." His voice got careful. "We just closed the Oakville project. The financing was layered, bridge loans, construction draws, investor repayments. Everything is tied up right now. Rochelle and I were literally just talking about the cash flow." A woman's voice cut through on his end. "Griffin, the Sings are waiting." "I've got to go, Dad. Can we talk this weekend? I'll see what I can move around." I said, "Griffin." The line went dead. I sat there with the phone still in my hand. Through the windshield, I watched a man in a hospital gown cross the parking lot slowly, one hand on an IV pole, moving like every step was a negotiation. I knew something about that. I was about to know more. The autumn sky over Hamilton was the color of old concrete. I put the truck in gear and drove home, both hands on the wheel, not trusting myself to think about anything at all. Willa called 3 hours later. She'd heard from my sister-in-law that something was going on. I told her everything, the diagnosis, the drug, the cost, $3,200. "How much do you have in your account right now?" she asked. "About $1,400. "Okay." A pause. "I'm coming over after my shift. Don't argue with me." She arrived at 8:30, still in her scrubs, straight from work. She was holding a white envelope, and she looked like she hadn't slept properly in a week, which she probably hadn't. "I've been putting money aside," she said. "A little every month. I knew you wouldn't ask, so I just saved it." I told her I was not taking her savings. She had a child. She had a car that needed new struts and a mortgage that had gone up with the rates. She took my hand and pressed the envelope into it. "You drove 4 hours to St. Catharines in a January snowstorm when I called you at 2 in the morning because I didn't know who else to call. You showed up every single time, Dad. Every time. So just stop." Inside the envelope was $1,400, 20s and 50s and a few 10s. The kind of money that comes from saying no to things, from counting carefully for months, from deciding that someone else mattered more than the little cushion you were building for yourself. I sat at my kitchen table with that envelope in my hands and didn't say anything for a while. 2 days later, Mitch Gothia showed up at my door. Mitch is a shop steward with the local. We'd worked together on the Link expansion in 2003, built like he could still set a column by hand. He had an envelope, too. "Brothers took up a collection," he said. "Don't say no. You gave 31 years to the structure of this city. We're not going to watch you go without treatment over a formulary delay." He wouldn't come in, just handed me the envelope and walked back to his truck. Inside was $980. Some bills were folded tight like they'd been pulled from wallets on the spot. The note on top was in Mitch's handwriting, "For Eugene, from the local. Get well. No payback required." That's not how this works. I spread the 3 piles on my kitchen table. $1,400 from Willa, $980 from the Union brothers, $1,417 from my account. Total, $3,797. Enough, with a few hundred left over. I should have felt relief. I felt something colder and cleaner than that. I felt clarity. A man who had just closed a $7 million deal could not spare $3,000 to keep his father alive. A woman who worked double shifts at $28 an hour had saved $1,400 for me without being asked. Men who went home, smelling like welding flux, had emptied their wallets without a second thought. I looked at those envelopes for a long time. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived from the WSIB. I almost didn't open it. I'd received enough WSIB correspondence over the years to fill a filing cabinet, and none of it had ever said what I wanted to hear. But I opened it. Following a comprehensive audit of denied claims from the mid-90s through 2002, my 1997 injury had been re-evaluated. A steel section had struck me during a pour at a commercial site in Stony Creek. 2 herniated discs. 3 months of physiotherapy. The original denial, according to the letter, had been based on a procedural error. The settlement check enclosed was for back compensation owed $29,000. I read the number 3 times and then sat down because my legs weren't reliable anymore. $29,000 for an injury I'd been carrying in my lower back for 26 years. For the mornings, I'd lain on the kitchen floor, stretching before I could stand up straight. For the years of anti-inflammatories and stubbornness. I called Emmett Barrow that afternoon. Emmett had helped me with the original WSIB appeal back in '97. He was semi-retired now, but he still took the occasional file. Former Army legal officer, sharp as ever. We'd stayed in touch, the way men stay in touch after going through something together. Not often, but honestly. "Eugene," he said when he heard my voice, "the settlement come through?" "Just opened it." Good, long overdue. A pause. What are you planning to do with it? I thought about Griffin's voice on the phone. Everything is tied up right now. I thought about Willa at my door in her scrubs at 8:30 at night. I thought about Mitch and the envelope. Emmett, I said, I need you to look into someone's finances. He already knew who before I said the name. What Emmett found over the next 2 weeks took me 3 sittings to get through. His company, Halloway Developments, Inc., named for his mother's maiden name, looked solid from the outside. 12 million in listed assets. Several active projects across Halton and Peel. But for every dollar of assets, there was 87 cents of debt. His primary construction financing was a bridge loan from a private lender, $8.2 million, already 3 months past its renewal date. I set that section down and went for a walk. The second section was worse. In 2020, I'd taken out a home equity line of credit on my house on Barton Street to help cover Joyce's palliative care. Home care in Ontario isn't fully covered. The personal support worker hours, the equipment rental, the supplemental medications, it added up. I'd borrowed $40,000 and paid most of it down before Joyce passed. I assumed the remainder was being handled through my automatic payments. According to the bank statements Emmett had obtained, a second HELOC application had been filed in my name in 2021. $65,000. The handwriting analyst Emmett hired confirmed that the signature on the application was not mine. It matched Griffin's handwriting in 4 characteristic ways. The loan had defaulted after 9 months and had been sitting on my credit report for 2 years. I'd wondered why my score had dropped. I'd assumed it was the medical expenses. It was my son. He had borrowed $65,000 in my name while I was grieving, and then he had let it default. I closed the folder and sat for a long time looking at the kitchen wall. The third section was about Albert and Rose Prentice of Burlington, both in their late 70s. Albert had been a machinist at Dofasco for 32 years. They'd saved carefully their whole lives. In 2022, Griffin had approached them with an investment opportunity, a pre-construction condominium project in Oakville. Guaranteed returns. He collected $55,000. The project never broke ground. When the Prentices tried to recover their money, Griffin's lawyers cited a clause in the investment agreement, classifying the loss as a market risk event. The Prentices had tried to pursue legal action. They ran out of money for legal fees before anything happened. Emmett told me their granddaughter had been trying to find someone to listen for 8 months. Her name was Tara Prentice, 26 years old. She'd found Emmett through a legal aid referral. I told Emmett to set up a meeting. 2 weeks after that, he called again. A private lender in Guelph was holding Griffin's bridge note, $8.2 million, and wanted it off their books. They'd sell at a steep discount. $2.3 million. They just wanted it gone. Emmett explained the structure carefully. A numbered company. The way it works in Ontario, just a provincial registration number, no identifying ownership details in the public record, could purchase the debt using a portion of Griffin's own liquid assets from Halloway Developments as collateral. Legal, complicated, but there was a window. Do it, I said. He filed the paperwork the next day. 1147823 Ontario Inc. registered agent address in Hamilton. Nothing more. 3 days after the purchase notice filed, I collapsed in my bathroom at 5 in the morning. It was a reaction to the cancer medication. Severe electrolyte imbalance. I hit the tile floor and couldn't get up. I managed to drag my phone off the counter edge and dial Willa's number. She was on shift, but she sent an ambulance and stayed on the phone with me until I could hear the paramedics at the door. I was in the ICU at Hamilton General for 2 days. Willa never left the building. She slept in the chair beside my bed, still in her work clothes, which meant she'd come straight from a 12-hour shift to sit in a hospital chair and watch machines. She woke up every time a monitor beeped. On the second morning, she told me she'd called Griffin. She'd called him from the waiting room while I was in intensive care. She told him I'd collapsed, that the situation was serious, that the doctors weren't certain yet. He said, "Keep me posted." That was all. Keep me posted, like she'd told him there was a delay on the 403. He asked me one more thing, Willa said quietly, looking at her hands. After a few seconds of silence, he asked if you'd updated your will recently. I looked at her. She nodded once. I looked back at the ceiling and didn't say anything. Before I tell you what happened next, type 7 in the comments if you're still with me. I want to know you're there. What follows is the part that changed everything, and I want you to see it. The formal notice went to Griffin on a Friday afternoon. 111-47823 Ontario Inc. had purchased his bridge financing. Full repayment was required within 30 days, or restructuring negotiations could be initiated with the new creditor. He called me that evening, 17 times. I watched my phone light up and did not answer. He left 3 voicemails. The first was confused, the second was sharp, defensive. The third was quiet in a way that told me the confusion had finally turned into understanding. I texted Emmett he got the notice. Emmett replied, "Ready when you are." I made the calls. Mitch Gauthier to book the Union Hall on Barton Street East for the following Thursday at 7. Willa, Tara Prentice, Emmett to send Griffin the formal creditor-debtor meeting notice, required in person, as per the lending agreement, within 14 days of the transfer. Location, Local 736 Union Hall, Hamilton, Thursday, 7 o'clock. On Monday, Griffin called again. I answered. "Dad." His voice was thinner than I'd ever heard it. "I need to know who this numbered company is. My lawyer can't find any ownership record." "I know." "What do you mean, you know?" "I mean, I know who they are." Silence, long enough that I could hear him breathing. Then very quietly, "Dad, is it you?" "Thursday, 7 o'clock. Come alone." I hung up. The Union Hall smelled the way it always had. Burnt coffee, decades of cigarette smoke worked into the walls, the cold of a building that holds heat reluctantly. I arrived an hour early. Mitch had set out chairs in rows, 53 of them. By 6:45, they were all filled. Ironworkers, retired and active. Some drove from Brantford, some from St. Catharines. When Mitch put the word out that it concerned Eugene Callister, they came. You don't ask why, you just come. That is what the brotherhood means, not in speeches, just in action. Willa sat in the third row with her arms folded, exhausted in a way that went down to the bone, but absolutely unmovable. Tara Prentice sat beside her. I'd met her the week before, 26 years old, bright eyes, carrying a fury that had been shaped by 8 months of being dismissed by every official process she'd tried. She had a folder on her lap. Emmett sat at a table near the front, his briefcase open, documents arranged in neat piles with colored tabs. I stood at the back when Griffin walked in at 7:02. His jacket alone probably cost more than Willa made in a week. His hair was neat. He stopped 3 steps inside the door and looked at 53 men looking back at him, and his composure did not shatter. But I saw it bend. He found me at the back and walked toward me. "Dad, what is this?" "Sit down, Griffin." He sat. Mitch spoke without a microphone, because he didn't need one. "We're here tonight because one of our brothers needed help and didn't get it from the person who should have offered it first. Eugene Callister gave 31 years to this trade. When he needed $3,000 for a medical treatment, his son told him everything was tied up. His daughter showed up. We showed up. His son did not." Griffin's jaw tightened. He started to speak. Mitch looked at him. He stopped. Emmett stood. He introduced himself briefly. Lawyer, former military legal officer, and then he laid it out without drama or embellishment. The numbered company, the bridge note, the 30-day clock. Then he placed a document on the table in front of Griffin. "That is a HELOC application filed in your father's name in 2021. $65,000. Page 3 contains the handwriting analysis. 4 characteristic matches to your handwriting. Your father's signature is not his." Griffin's face went the color of old snow. "This second folder contains the documentation compiled by the Prentice family of Burlington." Emmett set it beside the first. $55,000. "Albert and Rose Prentice, your investment agreement, the clause you invoked when the project failed to materialize." Tara Prentice stood up from the third row. She did not raise her voice. In that silence, she didn't need to. "My grandfather is 81 years old," she said, "and he blames himself. He sat across a desk from your son, looked him in the eye, shook his hand, and trusted him. That money was his entire retirement savings, After the lawyers were done, my grandmother stopped sleeping through the night. She still doesn't. She looked directly at Griffin. You sent them a letter about market risk, while they were still trying to understand what had happened. The room was very still. I walked to the front. I stood beside Emmett and looked at my son. 2 options, I said. Option 1, I instruct the numbered company to call the bridge note in full. 30 days. Holloway Developments collapses. Your credit is finished, and Emmett refers the HELOC forgery to Hamilton Police Service. Everything goes on the public record. I waited. Option 2, you remove the $65,000 HELOC from my credit file and absorb the debt yourself. You repay the Prentice family the full $55,000 within 60 days, certified check, no conditions, and you establish a bursary, $10,000 annually, administered through this local, for union members and their families facing out-of-pocket medical costs, for treatments not covered by OHIP or the provincial drug benefit. You name it whatever you want. But it lasts as long as Holloway Developments exists. No exceptions. And if I choose option 2, Griffin said slowly, the numbered company restructures the note. You keep your project. You keep your business. I met his eyes. But you don't walk away from what you did. You make it right. Every piece of it. The hall was completely silent. Griffin looked at his hands. He looked at Willa. She looked back at him with her arms still folded and offered him nothing. He looked at Tara Prentice. She did not look away. He looked at the 53 men sitting in rows behind him. He had never met most of them. They had shown up for someone they believed in, which was something he clearly did not yet fully understand. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, he said, option 2. Nobody moved for a moment. Mitch said, your lawyer contacts Emmett by Monday. Griffin nodded. He stood slowly, the way men stand when something heavy has just been settled on them, that they know they will be carrying for a long time. At the door he stopped and turned back. He looked at me across the length of the hall. I told myself there was a line between business decisions and family, he said. His voice was quiet, flat. I know there isn't. I've known for a while. I just kept drawing the line somewhere it was convenient. He left. The room exhaled. Willa was beside me before the door had fully closed. She didn't say anything right away, just stood close. You gave him a way out, she said finally. He's my son. He asked about your will, Dad, when you were in the ICU. I know. I put my arm around her. That's why option 2 is harder than option 1. He has to keep living with it. He has to see the Prentices' money come back to them. He has to write that bursary check every year and understand what it represents. That doesn't go away. She was quiet for a moment. Then, is that justice? It's the closest I know how to get. Griffin's lawyer called Emmett on Saturday. By the following Wednesday, the HELOC was formally removed from my credit file and transferred to Griffin's personal liability. The Prentices received a certified check on the 1st of December. Tara called to tell me. Her voice was different than it had been when we first met, less compressed. Like something she'd been holding for a long time had finally been set down. She said her grandfather had sat quietly at the kitchen table for several minutes after seeing the check, not saying anything, and then he had looked at her grandmother and said simply, "There's still good people." The bursary was established in January. Willa suggested we name it after Joyce, and I couldn't say no to that. The Joyce Callister Bursary for Health Access, administered through the local, $10,000 annually. The first grant went to a pipefitter from Brantford whose wife had been denied coverage for a medication her specialist said she needed. $1,200, enough to start. My cancer treatment continued. The targeted therapy did what the oncologist had hoped. The disease has been stable for 4 months. The provincial drug benefit program eventually added the medication to its formulary, which reduced my cost to a copay. The WSIB settlement covered my outstanding medical expenses, with enough left to pay Willa back to the last dollar and have her get those struts replaced on the Civic. She argued with me about it. I told her I hadn't asked for her opinion. She laughed, not the tired laugh I'd been hearing for months, just a real one, and said she'd book it in. Griffin and I talk now, not often and not easily, but we talk. He's working on a smaller project, Something he described to me on the phone as trying to do it the right way this time. I don't know exactly what that means yet. I'm watching, the way you watch something that might grow into something real, if you give it enough time and don't push too hard. There's a photograph on the mantel in my living room. Griffin at 7 years old, sitting on a beam at a job site I brought him to on a take-your-kid-to-work day. Hard hat 3 sizes too big for his head. Boots that didn't fit. Grinning like he'd just been handed the whole city. I remember lifting him up onto that beam and telling him to hold on to my hand. I've been thinking about that photograph more than usual lately. You spend enough years in this life, and you begin to understand something that sounds simple, but isn't. Love is not the feeling. It's the showing up. It's the envelopes on kitchen tables and the chairs beside hospital beds and the Union brothers who drive an hour through October rain on a Thursday night because one of their own needs witnesses. Love is not what you say when things are good. It's what you do when things are difficult and inconvenient and expensive, and there's somewhere else you could be. Griffin had to learn that the hard way. So do most of us, one way or another. I'm 67 years old. I have a disease I am managing, and a back I have been managing for longer than that, a pension that covers what it covers, and a daughter who calls me every Sunday without fail, even when her shift doesn't end until 11. I have brothers from the local who show up with envelopes when I haven't asked. I have a photograph of a 7-year-old boy on my mantel, and a complicated, cautious, slowly rebuilding relationship with the man he became. That is what I have. It is enough.